and I really want you to think hard about the answer here. Where do demons come from? It's not a trick question. Where do demons come from? Evil spirits. Where do they come from? If you know the book of Genesis, if you know the book of Enoch, you know the answer. Evil spirits weren't created by God, right? They didn't just fall from the sky, right? Where did they come from? The book of Enoch tells us that during the days of Jared, a group of angels, the Watchers, 200 of them, descended to the summit of Mount Hermon, and they took for themselves wives. Pay close attention, because this is going to be a bit eye-opening for you if you haven't thought about it before. Those 200 Watchers took for themselves wives, and they begot children who were mighty men of old, men of renown, the Nephilim. So when the Nephilim died, or when they were killed, because they were hybrids, because they did not belong to heaven or earth, they became disembodied spirits that would be known as evil or wicked spirits or demons. So evil spirits are the children of fallen angels, right? Who else's children are they? That's right. Human women. Folks, demons come from us. Human women gave birth to them. Human women gave birth to the Nephilim. The fallen angels didn't give birth to the Nephilim. They impregnated human women, and human women gave birth to the Nephilim. This is one of the reasons why evil spirits live next to and inside humans. Because they were once human. Well, part human. Anyway, that's not really what I want to talk about today, but think of it as a segue into the main topic here. So, how many of you watched the space launch last week? You know, the rocket ship launch to the moon and back. How many of you observed that launch? If you did you know that what you observed was not just a space launch, folks? It was a reenactment. Most people watched that space launch and all they saw was a rocket ship being launched into the sky. But there was a story being retold, almost like a theater play. An ancient story was being told. But understand, this wasn't a story that was being retold to us. It was being told to the ones who allowed that craft to be launched in the first place. You know, the ancient Greeks and Romans had terms for divine permission checking. The auspices and the augury, the act of asking the gods for permission through rituals and signs, all of that falls under the umbrella of divination.
Find your perfect tax expert.
So, before we talk about this recent space launch, I want to tell you a story. It's a little story, but it's going to help you to better understand how all this works and why everything was organized and coordinated in the manner that it was. Now, before I tell you this story, I want to be clear. This is just one version of several versions of mythology, okay? It is symbolic and metaphorical at best. It's not something you should think about as something based on true events. It's just mythology. Primarily a way to memorialize ancient gods, right? So, in Greek mythology, Artemis is the divine protector of wild places, animals, and the purity of the hunt. She is portrayed as a skilled archer who roams forests with her
Hello,
silver bow,
Skylar.
moving freely through nature and rejecting marriage or romantic attachment in favor of independence. Sounds familiar in 2026, right? Anyway, her twin brother, Apollo, represents the opposite force: order, foresight, calculated intelligence. Now, even though they are twins, Artemis belongs to the night, the moon. Remember that. And instinct.
He's my animal dog.
While Apollo rules the sun, of course, prophecy, and rational control. Then we have Orion, who is immortal, or in some traditions, semi-divine. He is a hunter of extraordinary size, strength, and skill. So great that he can track and kill any beast the earth produced. Sounds like a giant, right? Well, because of his unmatched talent, Orion eventually becomes associated with Artemis, and in some versions of the myth, he hunts alongside her as a companion in the wilderness, sharing in her domain of forests and beasts. Now, as Orion spends more time in Artemis's company, he becomes either a trusted hunting partner or, in some later retellings,
Message
someone
retracted.
whose
I wonder what
presence
it said.
Apollo begins to distrust. So Apollo, being so overprotective of his sister and associated with foresight, becomes uneasy about Orion's growing closeness to Artemis. How do we stop it? Artemis. The reasons vary depending on the version of the myth. Sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes it's concern for Artemis's independence, and sometimes a belief that Orion's pride or presence threatens the divine balance. Anyway, in the most well-known narrative reconstruction, Apollo devises a subtle test rather than confronting Orion directly. Well, it's not really a test, it's a trick. One day, while Orion is swimming far out in the sea, or standing as a distant figure on the horizon, Apollo points him out to Artemis from far away, and Apollo challenges her skill with a quite cruel deception. He suggests that she could demonstrate her unmatched archery skills by striking a distant object in the water, appearing as nothing more than a dark shape against the waves. Artemis, confident in her precision and unaware of the trick, takes aim with her bow. As the goddess of the hunt, she never misses her target, and her arrow flies across the distance. And she hits her target. Only after the strike does she realize the truth. The target was not an animal or object at all. It was Orion. In that moment, Artemis is overcome with grief, recognizing that she has killed her own companion through deception. Now, in many versions of the myth, she cannot reverse the act, as even the gods are bound by fate once an arrow has been released. After Orion's death, the gods intervened to preserve his memory.
People are telling me to open it.
So instead of allowing him to vanish entirely, he is placed among the stars as the constellation Orion, where he continues his eternal existence in the heavens. In this form, Orion becomes a permanent figure in the night sky, forever visible as a great hunter pursued across the stars. So folks, here's an article published by The Guardian. Not the best place to get articles from, but we'll just use this as an example. It's pretty long, so I'll summarize it for you. NASA's Artemis II mission, not spacecraft, but mission, launched on Wednesday, April Fool's Day, the day of trickery, at 6:35 p.m., 11:35 p.m. BST, from the Kennedy Space Center, marking the United States' first crewed mission toward the moon in more than 54 years, since Apollo 17 in 1972. The mission lifted off aboard the Space Launch System rocket carrying the Orion spacecraft, and was described as a flawless, fiery launch that drew massive public attention, with as many as 500,000 people gathering across Florida's Space Coast to witness the event after earlier technical delays in February and March. The 4 astronauts on board are Commander Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen. The mission set several historic milestones. Hansen became the first non-American to travel toward the moon. Glover became the first person of color on a lunar mission. And Koch became the first woman to participate in a lunar mission. Now, isn't that the diverse crew, folks? Who picked this crew? Disney? Anyway, before launch, Wiseman emphasized the mission's unifying intent, saying, "Yo, who's got next?"
Wait, I'm skipping before. Just trying to watch this video.
And saying, "We really are going for all, by all, and we want to take the whole world along with us," reflecting NASA's broader messaging that Artemis II is intended to represent humanity as a whole rather than a single nation. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman reinforced this vision after launch, stating, "We're going to get back in the business of launching rockets on a regular cadence, and we're going to bring the world along with us." He also referred to the mission as the beginning of a new era, describing it as the opening act. Now, he said it, folks, I didn't. Anyway, describing it as the opening act of NASA's plans to return humans to the moon and eventually reach Mars. The mission itself is a 10-day lunar flyby, meaning the crew will not land on the moon, but instead travel farther into deep space than any humans have in decades, reaching roughly 253,000 miles from the Earth, and passing within about 6,000 miles of the lunar surface on Flight Day 6, while testing Orion's systems for future missions. Now, I want to show you something else, folks. Let's take a closer look at the giant arrow they shot into the sky, the Orion craft. So you know they gotta throw the crescent moon, Artemis goddess symbol on there, right? What about on the crew patches? Look at that. Crescent moon symbolism, infinity symbolism. That A2 might actually be Greek symbols, lambda and pi, which could mean transitioning through a cycle, or changing or crossing over into a new cycle or phase. Who knows? Maybe none of this matters. They are taking a trip around the dark side of the moon, so we'll just have to wait and see how things go once they come back with the images. Anyway, that's going to be all for now, folks. Please click the thumbs up button and like this video. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. Everyone have a great day, and until next time, stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Ask you some questions, and I'll let you talk basically like I'm not here. And you can look right into the lens of the camera too, basically like an omnipresent observer. So first, I'll just have you introduce yourself, and then yeah, we can get right into it.
Okay, welcome. My name is Bob Cranmer. I live here in Brentwood, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh. I'm the author of the book, The Demon of Brownsville Road, and it's about circumstances that took place in this house 15, 20 years ago or so, and I'm here to answer your questions, so fire away.
Why don't we first just start out with the history of the property and kind of why
Sure.
beforehand it may have started?
Well, I did a lot of research on the background and the history of this house. I'm a former military intelligence officer and know how to gather facts and put them together to paint a picture, so to speak. And we were very interested in why this particular house was possessed by a demonic entity. And again, not just haunted. The haunted houses are relatively common, but what we experienced here was rare. At least rare from the standpoint of the entity that was here was a very powerful demonic force. It took great time and effort to exorcise it from the house. So I was interested into what took place here even before this house was built. And I discovered through various means that in 1792, not long after the Revolutionary War concluded, there was a very serious and great war with the Native Americans in western Pennsylvania and Ohio with the new American government. George Washington was president. After the Revolution, this land, which had heretofore been restricted by the British to settlement west of the Allegheny Mountains to keep peace with the Native Americans, was opened up by the new American government for settlement. And people flooded into this area, literally. The Native American tribes, the Iroquois Nation, who claimed that they were not party to the Treaty of Paris, and even though the British ceded this land to the United States,
What kind of cool effects can
they
we do?
saw it as their country, and they weren't welcome to it being populated by the new American nation. So they went to war. It was called the Northwest
Blue
Indian
retro.
War. Very vicious. One of the
That end up
greatest
doing
defeats of the American Army took place at St. Clair's defeat in Ohio, and the
That's kind of
Native
cool.
Americans pushed the frontier back to what is now Pittsburgh, the Monongahela and the Ohio River.
Weird.
And during that war, there apparently was a settlement right here, somewhere right where the house now stands. A mother and her 3 daughters were killed in a terror raid, which was
Tiani
unlike
Hernandez.
the Native American tradition. They didn't generally kill women and children, but in this case, it was a war of terror. Send a message: if you bring your family here, you're going to die, and your family as well. So we were only 6 miles from Fort Pitt, which had been reactivated, and re-garrisoned. And it was surprising that an attack of this nature took place so close to the fort, but it did. The 4 bodies are buried in what is now the front yard of this house, and the father, who was not present when it took place, came home to find his slain family. His name was Deliverance Brown. Buried his family in the front yard. And what we feel is that, the Native Americans used to pray to their spirits for courage and victory in their attacks and their wars.
What happened?
And we feel whatever spirit that was associated with that violent, vicious raid and the murder of those children and their mother attached itself to the land, and that it was an evil entity and came to inhabit the house after it was built, this house, and that the pattern of hurting and killing children continued, as in the 1920s it was used by a pediatrician as an illegal abortion clinic, and many abortions were performed in one of the bedrooms upstairs. So that's what we discovered, and what I feel was the genesis for the evil in the house.
Take me to the very first time that you came to the house. What did it feel like right when you arrived, when you first purchased the property? What was it like?
Well, I grew up in this neighborhood, in this community, and from my earliest memories, say from, as a 7 years old, when I could, walk the streets by myself, and I had friends who lived right near the house, and I used to walk by this house, and it always captivated me. All through my childhood and teen years, I could never pass this house without having an attraction to it. It always felt to be drawing me in. I would stand out on the sidewalk and just look at it. And I always wanted to come inside and look at the house. And I wanted to know about the people who lived here and so on. Years later, I graduated from Duquesne University and went on to become a regular Army officer. And I was in the Army not quite 10 years. Was married, had 4 children, and we decided it was time to leave the military, and we moved back here to Pittsburgh. I initially had a job in New Jersey with AT&T, and I was fortunate to be able to get a job in Pittsburgh, and I transferred here, so we came here in 1988. New family, very excited to come home. We're particularly planning on living in this community. We were looking to move to one of the newer developments further out, but my mother told me that the week we were moving back, interestingly enough, that this house was going to be put on the market for sale. So at that point in time, I basically knew what house we were going to buy, and we came here to see the house. So from the first time coming in to look at it, we had 2 of our children with us, our 4-year-old daughter, Jessica, and our 3-year-old son at the time, Bobby. And we were walking through the house, the owners were showing it to us. It wasn't on the market yet, so there was no realtor involved. And we were in the basement looking at the furnace, and my wife noticed that our son Bobby wasn't with us. And this being a large house, they headed upstairs to find where this 3-year-old boy was, and found him halfway up to the second floor on this large staircase, has a landing halfway up, and he was trembling and gasping for air, like he had seen a ghost. And the woman of the house, the lady who owned it, rushed past my wife and embraced my son and says, "Honey, what's wrong? Did you see something?" My wife thought that was an interesting, odd question to ask him as to what would he have seen to elicit such a reaction. As time went on, when we bought it, I would come to know why. And it was interesting when I made my offer, which was, as I recall, about $20,000 less than what they were asking for the house. They immediately took my first offer, which surprised me. They were anxious to leave. They wanted to get out, and I know why. because the house was uncomfortable for them.
So, what was the first experience that you guys had that was
Paranormal,
Yeah.
So the first incident that really confirmed to my wife and I that there was something besides us in this house, that there was a spirit in the house. And again, before this, I had no interest in ghosts. I had never had any experience. This was long before the paranormal craze. You know, I'd seen the movie, you know, seen movies about haunted houses and The Exorcist and so on, but I had no particular interest in it. I had never had a paranormal experience. My wife had not either. The first event that did confirm to us that there was something else in the house was an incident that took place.
I'm not really a cupcake, but I am super baked. Mixed in with Canada.
For this commercial.
Place in a closet, a large walk-in closet that's under the staircase that goes to the second floor. The staircase goes up to a landing and then reverses back up. So there's this large open area under the staircase. I noticed that inside the closet, because it's large, there's a light, an old-fashioned Victorian light with a brass pull chain, and you simply open the door and reach in where the light is and pull its chain, turn on the light, get your coat or whatever you're looking for. And I noticed after a week or so being in the house, a few weeks, that when I would go into the closet to get my overcoat to go to work in the morning, that this hanging chain on the light would be meticulously wrapped around the top of the light, or even around the little screws that held the shade, the crystal shade to the light. So you would go to pull on the chain and it wouldn't pull because it was either wrapped around the top of the light or on one of these little screws. So I obviously thought that my wife was going in and pulling the chain and letting it fly, and it would wrap itself around. So I asked her not to do that it was aggravating to have to feel in there, because you can't generally see it when you open the door. You have to feel for where the light is, and she responded that she wasn't pulling on the light hard, it wasn't letting the chain fly, and she didn't know what I was talking about. So one morning we opened the closet. I unwrapped the chain, turned on the light, closed the door, turned out the light, and we agreed, don't go in the closet for the rest of the day. Now, our children were 4 and below, so this light is 6 feet off from the floor, so they obviously weren't doing it. And when I came home that night, we went to the closet, opened the closet door, reached for the light, the chain was wrapped around the light again. So with that absolutely confirmed to us that something was doing it. We didn't do it, and there's no way that chain, would mysteriously float and wrap itself around the light. So that began. I eventually had to take a wire and tie it to the chain and tie it to a coat hook to keep it in place. That began a whole series of seemingly innocuous, not threatening type things that would happen in the house in the coming years, where once you get past it, you're not really scared, but it's somewhat unsettling. Furniture would be moved, you'd come down in the morning, the lights would be all on, radios would be playing. I had a radio in the basement in my workshop. I'd invariably go down all the time.
YouTube live streams are equal parts
So
terrifying
like
and fascinating.
Again, not
I can't believe
really
this
threatening,
is real.
but nonetheless.
Time to up your t-shirt game. With millions of designs to choose from, Public is ready to find your next daily.
Unnatural.
When did it start to become something?
It's got its own
more
little
than
box too.
just
Interesting or
Playful.
Yeah, playful. Well,
It's inside a glass
this thing
box.
had evil intent, obviously, and it began, and eventually it worked on us, worked on our minds, scared the children, began to affect them after 6 years or
He's
so
got a
in the
little message
house.
too.
6 or 7 years. My wife had what amounted to a
Warning.
like mental breakdown, had to be
Positively.
hospitalized. Two of my children
Do
eventually
not
had to be
open.
hospitalized as well for psychiatric treatment. Were very dysfunctional. At the time, I had no idea the two were related, that this spiritual presence that didn't seem to be threatening was in fact working on us as well. And it progressively got worse, and then finally, after we had been in the house for over a decade, all hell broke loose, so to speak. It's all detailed in my book how it moved along, but it became, at that point, very open, in your face, so to speak. I mean, it became very dangerous, and that's when I sought help. But we lived with it in the house for a number of years. I didn't realize or correlate what it was doing to us and our mental state with the benign spirit, which we thought it was at the time.
So what started to happen that was beyond the happy?
Yes, I understand. Well, a whole series of events took place with the family, with one of my sons, and became very chaotic. And then when the paranormal, I guess the one event that happened that really scared me, and I realized that this thing was dangerous, that it wanted to hurt us. My oldest son Bobby was in his bedroom one day after school, and he was a teenager then. I guess he was about 17 years old. And he heard a loud, like a pop, not like a gunshot or explosion, kind of almost like a light bulb breaking. That real loud pop in the corner of his room. And he heard something whisk past his head and hit the wall. And what it was, and he went over to find that a music disc, a CD, some way mysteriously, it was like it was shot out of a gun, in the corner of his room, right past his head, hit the plaster wall, again, plaster about an inch thick plaster, and it hit that wall with such velocity that it shattered like a plate thrown against concrete. And if you think of a music disc, I mean, they're pretty durable. I mean, even to break one in half would take some effort. And if I took a music disc and threw it against the wall, it may chip it or crack it. But this thing came by his head with such velocity, I could hold what was left of it in my hands. It was just shards of plastic. Had that hit him, it probably would have killed him. That's when I realized that this thing was dangerous, and it became even more apparent in the things that it would do. It would take all the pictures in the house and turn them sideways on the wall. It would move furniture. It just did a whole series of things to let us know it was there, which progressively got more and more daily, on a daily event, or a daily basis, I should say, the events took place, especially after we began battling it with the Catholic priests.
And how did the priests become involved?
This is the absolute best phone holder for your phone.
Bruh.
Well, at the time when this stuff started to happen, and again, it was before, the whole paranormal craze, and every town and city now has a whole host of paranormal investigators and paranormal teams, which I must make a comment to them. To me, that's a very dangerous hobby to have. You can go and investigate ghosts and so on, but you come across one of these evil entities, these evil spirits, they can hurt you, and they can hurt you severely. To me, it's kind of like having a hobby where I, defuse bombs. Not something that you should take lightly or even be involved in. I have a lot of experience in this, obviously. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. I was in the midst of battling one of these spirits. People come to me all the time, and I'll refer them to other. I don't want to be involved with this. I don't want to touch it. It's dangerous. It's dangerous work. So, how did they become involved? What do you do? You know, it's the famous "who are you going to call?" You know, from Ghostbusters. I was not Catholic at the time. Evangelical Christian. Went to the pastor of my church. I knew that this was not normal. It was evil. I felt I needed religious help. He wanted nothing to do with it. He thought I was a little kooky. I told him what was happening. You know, it was outside of his realm, outside of his comfort zone. But I did know from just, you know, movies like The Exorcist that the Catholic Church claims to have a handle on this type of situation. I was a former politician, high-level politician in Pittsburgh. I was friends with them, who was the mayor of Pittsburgh at the time, good friends, and I had told him what was taking place, and he went and visited the Bishop of Pittsburgh, Donald Worrell, went on to become a cardinal of the church, Archbishop of Washington, D.C. And eventually he assigned a priest. That eventually included a number of priests, a team of priests who would work with us for the next 2 years. They did bring an exorcist in from the Archdiocese of New York to perform an exorcism. Father James Labar, he had done a famous TV exorcism with Geraldo Rivera years ago. That's how the church got involved. But I might say that they were befuddled to an extent how their procedures and what they do. For about a year, it wasn't working. It wasn't working. This thing was so powerful that it was holding on and holding its own. It became, after a period of time, a test of just endurance. And the battle fell to me, my wife and I, our family, because it had to be waged on a daily basis, and it just took a long time before the final scene, the final exorcism.
Any pizza, any topping.
When you're deep into your research, madness takes on a completely different meaning.
So, what were, I guess, the two most frightening things that happened to your family, would you say, that kind of were the impetus to calling the priests? When was it too dangerous?
Well, and as I had said, that incident with the music CD to me was scary. Now, things got a lot worse in the house, especially during the first year. Again, this began in late 2003 and did not end until early 2006. So it was over 2 years. After the battle took place for the first year, and I realized things weren't getting any better, it was getting worse in the house, we were ready to just give up and move out. What took place at that point, and I feel it was the spirit somewhat claiming victory, because it knew it had worn us down, kind of like a fight against the ropes, just ready to just quit. It began to throw a blood-like substance onto the walls. When I say throw, you hear of bleeding walls. Apparently, this happens in these situations with blood on the walls. The walls don't secrete or exude. In our case, it was very similar to, for those that are familiar with the Catholic practice of blessing a room or a house with holy water, they or people, so to speak, they take this vessel, it's in a vase, and they throw the holy water, and droplets of it go on the walls and whatever you're blessing. If you can imagine doing that, not with holy water, but with a pitcher full of blood. So you have these large droplets of this blood-like substance and we have almost 10-foot ceilings in this house, so the walls are high, and it was all the way at the top. And it began on the 3rd floor and eventually made its way throughout the house. Every day or so, we would find it in different rooms of the house. And that was very, very unsettling, so to speak. And right away, people say, well, what was it? Was it blood? It wasn't blood. I had it tested by various labs. They never were able to determine that it was, it wasn't blood, even though they did find skin cells in it. It was a mixture, a concoction of different chemicals that shouldn't have been together. They didn't know what it was, but it looked like blood. It would appear on the floors, on the hardwood floors, in puddles in different places. There was also some clear liquid that would appear on the floors. It smelled, and again, this stuff, it didn't happen once, it didn't happen twice. It was almost a daily occurrence. We lived with this, and things like that. I can remember one instance which was very unsettling. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was completely turned around in bed, meaning that went to bed, my wife was in bed next to me. I woke up and I was under the blankets, under the covers, my feet were on my pillow and my head was at the base of the bed. Now I don't have a habit of getting up in the middle of the night, get back in bed like that. I had not been out of bed, but I was some way turned around in bed. And things like that. It's just crazy. But
How do we stop it?
We need someone who can code in COBOL.
What's COBOL?
but we dealt with it.
So did you ever find anything interesting out about the house, or maybe anything inside of the house while all this was happening?
Yeah, the Catholic Church had us contact, again, this is before the paranormal craze, and there was a group of students at Penn State University that had paranormal research. They were the first. They went on to have their own television show, matter of fact, called Paranormal State. Ryan Buell, who went on, I believe, he had his own personal issues, which I think he attributes to his work here in this house. But we contacted them. The church wanted to have an outside investigative team verify that there was unnatural things happening in this house. People that weren't associated
staying
with
on this
religion,
live.
that were somewhat scientific, and they were. First they came 10 different people, students with, everything, EVP meters and infrared cameras, and they wired the whole house up and recorded things, and it was quite impressive. They came to the house twice. They had talked to some type of medium, some type of spiritual person who apparently, as I understand it, was going to come with them, but then told them that she was from Gettysburg, and her name was Julie, I believe, and she said, guys, I'm not going to that house, and I recommend you stay away from it as well. So she didn't come, but she did tell them that there is a void, a space in the center of the house. That's where this thing is its lair, so to speak, and you need to get into that space. So the first thing they asked me when they came, if in fact a space existed, and I said yes. In fact, it was the area in the center of the house underneath the grand staircase. So I went into that closet that I referred to earlier with the light and the chain, cut through the wall. Now, mind you, the house at the time was almost 100 years old. It was built in 1909, and this was 2005. So we cut through the plaster wall. This area under the steps had been sealed off for almost 100 years since the house was built, and they found a whole host of items under the steps that were interesting, and one of which should not have been there. They found some of my son's Lego toys in this area, completely, sealed off. No way into it. Lego toys. They found a large piece of amber. It was several inches large or long. Amber had traditionally been used throughout, I guess, the Middle Ages as to ward off evil. Why that was in there. They also found an interesting picture that apparently had been drawn by the original owner of the house, and it was a nice drawing. He was an artist. What appeared to be his wife and his mother-in-law in the backyard looking at a sunset. And on the reverse of that drawing were these very bizarre, evil-looking pictures that one of the priests later told us was a curse. It was put on the family, and it was put on this drawing, crumpled up and thrown under the steps. I go into much greater detail in the book, but we found things. We found a bird skeleton in there. We found some playing cards that may have had some significance. And after we broke into that area, again, which this mystical woman had told us was the spirit's lair, all hell really broke loose in the house at that point. And it became a battle royale, so to speak. It's a long answer to
Hello,
your
friend.
question.
That was perfect. What was the climax of the story?
Okay.
How did it kind of come full circle?
Well, after the Father Labar came and was here for several hours performing this exorcism, this ritual, from that point forward, the house was calm, but I still saw the thing, and it would appear in different shapes and forms, and it would let you know it was there. It had this stench. I don't even say foul smell. It was a stench that it would give off when it was in the room with you. Kind of like a burning sulfur, burning rubber type of smell that was very pungent. And I saw again, it would appear as a black shadow, a black cloud. Sometimes it would take on a bodily form that would be seen. I never saw it in the bodily form, but my children and some of their friends saw it. It was always like the man in black, so to speak, almost like the Grim Reaper with a long black cape on. So I knew it was in the basement still. So we had one of the primary priests of the team, and I said we would have mass almost weekly in the house. I said we have to concentrate in the basement, and there was a mass that was celebrated, said in the basement.
Why does
Family
everybody leave
present.
after like
Various incidents
5
took
seconds?
place during the mass that let us know that the spirit was present. It liked to do that during mass. It wanted to let you know that it was there, and you'd either smell its stench, or it would make noises. In this case, it knocked on the wall. After that, some
Can I do
things took
flash?
place
Yeah, you can do flash.
that told us where it was. We kind of cornered it in a room that had once been used to store coal in, and we confronted it, said prayers, and it was finally expunged from the house. Now, I always thought that maybe there would be some great fanfare when it left, like there would be a thunderbolt or something. But it was more like a fire that eventually just burned itself out, and it just petered away and left. And I knew at that point in time, a peace came over me, a peace came over the house, that it was gone, that it was over. We had mass so many times and gone through so many ups and downs and feeling that we were making progress, but at that point in time, I knew it was done. Now, for a number of months after that, I had kind of a post-traumatic stress syndrome, where I was always on edge about, was it still coming back or so on. It was gone. It's been gone. That was the climax of the story. So after I went through this several-year process, again, initially, when it began, my friend the mayor said, you need to keep notes. I thought it would be like, calling the exterminator.
Like, it's just like, nope.
The Ghostbusters, who would come and do whatever they did, maybe once, maybe twice, and it would be over. So he said, you need to keep notes of what's happening, what's going on. So I did begin to keep a daily diary. Little did I know at the end I'd have 350 pages of detailed notes as to what took place during the whole process. And he said, you gotta tell the story, man. I'm telling you, this happened. It is true. No matter, people read my book, and I read your reviews on Amazon, And most of them are very good. People impressed by it. But a lot of people get very angry when they read the book because I feel it challenges what they believe or maybe what they don't believe in. And maybe they don't believe in God. They don't believe in the hereafter or spirits or good or evil. And my message is, you can believe whatever you want. You can be sincere about whatever you want. But I'm telling you that this happened. And it wasn't aliens. It wasn't our imagination. This was good and evil. This was that, I don't say that the devil itself was here, but this was evil. Good and evil, God, angels, it's all true. It's all true. And that's the message. And when I understand and record, what eventually prevailed over the evil, and that was the cross of Jesus Christ. That was it. And that upsets people, but that's the truth. So I wrote the book. My life has been somewhat turbulent even since the book was written. I compare it to like outing the mob. The mob's not happy when they're exposed. The devil's not happy when it's exposed. So it's been gone. It was 2006, 15 years or so. The book has gained, a following. There have been several television programs. There may be a movie. And I believe it's probably the most complete, concise story of any on this subject. And I'm left with this house, not exactly a great selling point. If I'm, my children, this house was too big for us to begin with, and 3 stories and 14 rooms, and I find myself with it. Now the house is clean, mind you. There's no problems with it. So what do I do with this house? So I decided to convert it and make it into a bed and breakfast. And that's what it is now. People that have read the book, that are interested, that want to come and experience the house and say they stayed here, it's open. And for people who just plain need a place to stay in Pittsburgh, it's a website. It's called the Brownsville Roadhouse. We sell the books as well. I'll even sign a copy for you.
So at the end of the day, it's a lot better now. It's obviously gone, but your story is kind of a message not to mess with evil.
Right, I used to have this constant.
Well, again, as I said before, ghosts are interesting. What is a ghost? A ghost is really the spirit of a person who once lived. And for whatever reason, when they die, and their death generally has to do with some type of tragedy or some unsettling event in their life, and their spirit doesn't go on to whatever its eternal destination is. And how that works, we really don't know. You don't know until you experience it, and there's not, it's all conjecture. All, people's idea of the afterlife, it's all conjecture. But these spirits, these ghosts exist, relatively common, haunted houses. What is it? I think it might be related to the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. For whatever reason, people have to stay in place for a period of time for maybe to atone for something. I don't know. But on the other hand, there are these angelic beings. There are good angels and there are bad angels. The Bible talks about the rebellion that took place before creation against the Creator by Satan and 1/3 of the angels who were cast down to the earth. That's why there's evil in the world today. There is evil in the world, and there is good. And there's this battle that takes place, and we're kind of in the middle of it all because it's about us. And that's the way it is. And that's what I believe this story, in a way, confirms this is true, and it can be extrapolated out and how it applies throughout the world.
Perfect. Well,
Okay. there's the light, and that's how it generally would be. I'd come in and pull on this. And I conducted some experiments. I put a real heavy lead weight on here. It probably weighed 6 ounces or so. And left it, came back minutes later,
Okay, so
and
this the
the
whole
lead
time.
weight and everything was up around the top. I was wondering if, can it just lift this, or could it lift something with some weight? It could. I think these are still the same rosary beads. I actually tied these rosary beads onto the chain and came up, and the chain and all the rosaries were wrapped around the light as well. So it was, and then here's where, if you can even see, there's a lot of, I store Christmas things in there now, but that's where we cut through the wall and opened the
creepy.
large area back in there where the thing used to hang out. So this is the famous closet. Everyone who comes here wants to see the closet.
Well,